Westfall, who was the team captain for the Islander, presented her with the roses after she finished her song and let the game begin. And we were fortunate to come on top.
Yeah, the Vancouver incident was, I was really a victim in that deal. They called it the Vancouver Seven, and there were 7 of us that were arrested for going into the fans and for fighting with the fans. And the way that started was that I was in a fight with a guy on the ice, and a fan reached over and grabbed me by the hair and started almost lifting me off the ice. And when that happened, it just happened to be right beside our bench. So all of the guys from our bench unloaded into the stands and went after this guy, and it erupted into a pretty significant brawl. I still say I was a victim because I never left, I never jumped into the stands. I stayed on the ice, and all I did was get my hair pulled, and I got thrown into it with the rest of them. So I blame the other guys on the team for that brawl. That wasn't even me. I was just happened to be there.
When Mike Keenan took over, the Flyers also previously had made one of the bigger trades since I've been covering the team. Kenny Linsman, a real popular player, the Rat, if you will, part of the 35-game unbeaten team. He was sent in a trade for Mark Howe out of Hartford. Mark Howe turned into the best defenseman I've ever seen in Philadelphia. Just a smooth, elegant player. I used to just like to watch practice, to watch Mark Howe skate. It was just so beautiful to watch him skate. People forgot he was a forward at first. He comes back and plays defense and whatever he asked him to do. And he was one of those guys. People say you just lead by your example on the ice. And he led by his example. Nothing bothered him. Some players would tell you, I don't read anything. Mark Howe didn't read anything. I swear to God, no matter what he didn't know. He didn't read a paper. He honestly didn't. He just went out, played the game. He was like Mr. Hockey 2, if you will. And he had a great reverence for the game, and he had a great reverence for that team, but he was leaned upon so heavily in those years. And he got to mix with a guy like Timmy Kerr. Timmy was just this, he was like a big golden retriever was his personality, just wag his tail. But he had the spunk of a Rottweiler. So it was this weird combination of this nicest guy, and then he'd go out on the ice and just snarl. You know, nobody could move him out of the front of the net. Nobody could stop that wrist shot. It was just a terrific combination of him up front, and then Mark Howe kind of having things at the back. And the Beast, Brad McCrimmon had the nickname the Beast, and he just played a gritty. Brad McCrimmon was like one of those guys, you wind him up in October and it would unwind finally in May. And you just absolutely no maintenance at all. Wind him up, send him out there, he plays, shut up, come in, take your shower and go home. And Keenan benefited from that because if you had issues, they kind of grind on Keenan. But these guys were the perfect mix for him.
I remember the year we lost Edmonton in 7 games. We had Game 6 at home. And the warm-up was basically filled, and it was unbelievably loud. And then at the start of the game, I always tell people it went so loud it went quiet. And unless you're on the ice for that kind of a rush and that kind of a noise, you don't really understand. But when you're on the ice and you're the focal point of all that noise, it just went quiet. And it's really a sound I've never heard again, but it was one I'll remember.
My most vivid memory from that brawl was, and some of the guys already had their skates off and stuff, I remember John Kordick for the Canadians, who I don't even know if he was dressing either, but he was out for warm-up. I remember him sitting on the Montreal Canadiens bench, tying his skates up, kind of watching the brawl, and Darryl Stanley standing on the ice outside the bench waiting for him to come out, kind of like a ho-hum, okay, tie your skates up and then come out, we're going to fight. Because those two guys were two tough guys, and they probably had fought each other before. But just Kordick, nonchalantly doing his skates up, watching, and then he stepped out on the ice, and then him and Stanley, okay, here we go, and they went at it.
I remember a short story going into Tim Hortons for coffee with our coaching staff one morning, and one of the local radio celebrities was standing outside with a microphone yelling at our hotel and waking the players up at 7 o'clock in the morning, coming in to Tim Hortons and yelling and wanting to talk with Hitch and yelling at Hitch, and our coaching staff got upset about it, and we just didn't enjoy what was going on in that situation. But that was a very intense rival, and in the game that finally ended the series in Toronto, I remember Sammy Kapanen getting hit so hard by Darcy Tucker, he was dazed, couldn't get up. He tried 3-4 times to get up, struggled to the bench, players reaching over top of the boards, pulling him on, and wouldn't you know it, as soon as JR jumps on the ice, the puck comes out of the Toronto zone and he goes in and scores the winning goal, and everybody just broke loose. It was incredible, incredible series.
Well, I was really fat, I can tell you that. I had a big gut hanging over, and I said, this is where it pays to be like a bear who hibernates, just save up the fat for a big game like this. We had all kinds of guys, obviously, some guys were taking IVs, some guys were doing, obviously the guys that played a lot more than the average bear were out there a ton. So we had to keep those guys fresh in the mind as well. And I can remember actually going on for a shift, standing at center ice right in front of our bench and looking one way, looking the other way, and saying change, and looking on the bench and climbing back in as quick as I could as my legs just completely cramped. And everyone was laughing about that too. So we, again, specifically, I don't know if there's a whole lot that you can remember, because things are happening as slow as it seems to be unfolding on TV. It's happening pretty quickly for the guys that are playing and the guys that are in that dressing room. It seemed like the intermissions were 5 minutes long, because you wanted to curl up in a ball and have a nap and then go back out there. But by the time you'd taken your gear to get it dried, you're going back on the ice. So as slow as the night might have seemed for fans, it was a short night for us as players, because everything seemed to be happening so quickly.
He was the color man originally, and then became the voice of the Flyers. And Gene was pretty amazing. In those early years, he was a school teacher, and of course, we couldn't afford big salaries, and we were doing our own television, producing it ourselves and selling the ads ourselves and buying the time on the TV station. And Gene kept his job as a school teacher, yet made every road game and got back the next day in time for school. And how he did it in those days, I'll never know. But he managed to get back from every city after every game and to be in school at 9 a.m. ready for his students. He was an amazing guy, and I'll never forget hearing his broadcast when we won the first cup. At the end, when we won the cup, it's just, we hear those words in our sleep, and it was just so incredible, and it's just typical of Gene Hart.
I made more money for him than I did for myself. Yeah, in 1972, the Flyers drafted him, and I told Jimmy I'd represent him, and he said fine. So I started talking to Keith Allen, and I made a better deal for my brother Jim. He was making more money for him than I was for myself in those days, but I eventually caught up to him. And but you know what? We were the fourth brother combination ever to play on a team that won the Stanley Cup. So it was really nice to play with Jimmy. And Jimmy was a real good hockey player. I mean, he was a better skater than I was, faster, and shoot the puck and all that stuff. And I was kind of a plumber type. I tried to battle out in the corners in front of the net, but we were two different players. He was a much better skater and great shot and passed the puck. And in 1976, I had a bad injury. He was playing for Team Canada against the Team Canada series up in Canada, and he got hit with a puck. I think it was this guy shot him, broke his nose and his cheekbone, and lost some teeth and everything else. But it was a wonderful experience to play with your brother and be in a Stanley Cup together and march down Broad Street together. And our parents were here at the time, so that was very rewarding. I think rewarding for them too.
We were playing a game in Detroit, and we were just getting ready to head out to L.A. And Mike Keenan came in, and Mike says, okay, guys, we win this game today. You have the next 2 days off in LA. You can have a good time. And then we had the game like 5 days later, something like that. So we come out, we're losing 3 or 4 to 1 at the end of the first period. Mike come in ranting and raving and screaming. He said, "All right, so I'll tell you." He says, "I'll give you 3 days off. You guys win this game." So Mike goes out and Tim curses. "Don't worry about it, guys. We got this game won." I think we scored 6 or 7 goals. I think Timmy had 3 goals and 2 assists or something.
Funny story I can tell you about Russia. Freddie went to Russia after they won the first Stanley Cup because he wanted to that summer. I saw him back at training camp the next day. Soon he got back, first day of training camp. And I said, "Now, Freddie, what was Russia like?" And he looked at me and he says, "It's amazing. There's no crime in Russia." I said, "Really, Freddie? Why is that?" And he said, "It's not allowed." So, of course, there is crime in Russia, but that was, that's the way Freddie kind of looked at things.
I remember once he came into Keith Allen and he said, "I want to be traded." And Keith said, "What's wrong?" I just want to be traded. And Keith called me and told me, and we talked it over, and we conducted an investigation to the best of our ability. And we found out that there was another player that we had that we were sort of babying and allowing to do things that you really shouldn't allow in an organization, which we really hadn't focused on. And we realized that Barry Ashby didn't want to be part of that. And he actually taught us a lesson. And we changed our ways tremendously because of that. He was just a solid individual. And I'm sure you've already heard from others that he played with injuries you never knew that Barry even had an injury. He just was that solid.
One of the things that I remember to this day, which and I'll never forget, was when we hit the ice at what was then called the Spectrum. You had a capacity crowd that were hollering and screaming when we hit the ice. Must have been a 7-minute ovation, and I could be standing beside a teammate and try to tell him something, and he wouldn't be able to hear me. That's how loud the people were, and that's something that, like I said, I'll never forget. But we didn't intimidate Montreal because they won the next 3, and that was a series. But that was a real pleasant memory.
And I used to go down and block a lot of shots, and I took a great deal of pride in that. And the shot, I could see the shot coming, and I went down to block it. And just as I went down to block it, Billy Hickey skated in front of me, and I lost sight of the puck. And the next thing I know, it's about 6 inches from me, and it hit me right in the mouth. And yeah, I lost 7 teeth and 52 stitches, and I was in my macho stage. I was the captain of the team at that time, and you got to go back in and get sewed up and come on back out. And that's exactly what I did. And that doesn't say that I was, I guess, courageous or anything else. That's just the way hockey was played, especially at that time. And one of the memories I have from that, Senator Hubert Humphrey at that time was interested in becoming the President of the United States, and I received a letter from him, and the letter was something that I take a great deal of pride in. It was very kind, very, very, I guess, expressing the way he felt about, what had happened, and I guess the character to have gone through it and came back out and played, and it had his stamp on it and his signature on it, and to this day I value it. In fact, I've got it framed as one of my most important pieces of memorabilia.
Reggie used a very, very short stick with this very small blade. It was almost like a child stick. And if you looked at Reggie's stick on the bench before the game,